Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur wrote the Chaitanya Bhagavat first. So Krishnadas Kaviraj, out of humility, didn't want to repeat what already his predecessor acharyas had written. So he filled in whatever Vrindavan Das Thakur hadn't written. So when Vrindavan Das Thakur wrote his commentary, or rather his remembrance, interpretation of this particular pastime, in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, he didn't include the conversation, the argument, the philosophical argument. Vrindavan Das Thakur very elaborately explains the procession. It takes about 30 or 40 verses to describe how Nimai Pandit, at that time he was called Gaura Hari, he was accustomed to having his chanting privately. See, when he came back from Gaya, when he was initiated, for 1 year, he used to have his chanting, nocturnal chanting in the evenings, and he would have it at one of two places, Chandrasekhar's house or Srivasangam, and mostly Srivasangam. And it was always a very personal, private affair. He would only invite pure devotees, Sudha Bhaktas. And the outsiders couldn't get in. So, one time the village people came to Lord Chaitanya, and they were sort of a little lamenting, why can't we join in this kirtan? Why can't we join in this nocturnal kirtan? So Lord Chaitanya, according to Chaitanya Bhagavat, then at that point he gave them advice. And he said, you should always think of Krishna's name and think of his qualities. You should not engage in prajalpa. And you should chant Krishna's name loudly. And in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, the Maha Mantra is mentioned. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Directly it is mentioned. And then he also mentioned, you can sing this song, Hare Haraye Nama Krishna, Yadavaya, Keshavaya, Madhavaya, that famous song. So he told the townspeople, gather together in your houses, 5 or 10 of you, also chant on the streets. So then they started doing it. But at that point, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had still not taken his kirtan out into the public. It was still private. So this is when the Chankazi came. Then the Chankazi came, and he stopped the performance of Sankirtan. And he did it in a very violent way. He broke the drum, and his accomplices conspired against the Vaishnavas. And after that, Chankazi would travel around, and he would look. He had his spies, and he was looking for anyone who was chanting the Lord's holy name. And he had many envious people in the Smarta Brahmin community who were against Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So it's at that point that Chankazi broke the drums, and then they reported to Mahaprabhu, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. At that point he was referred to as Gaura Hari, Chaitanya Charitamrita. He liked to be called Gaura Hari. And Gaura Hari gave the instruction, tonight we're going to go on Maha Kirtan. And he said, as light as many torches as you can. So there were koti. What's a koti? 10 million. There were millions and millions of torches being lit. And it's described that even the demigods assumed human form to join in this tremendous chanting party. And they gathered together, and Lord Chaitanya had 3 main dancers. Haridas Thakur was one main dancer in one group. Advaita Acharya was another main dancer in another group, and himself, Lord Chaitanya, was in the 3rd group dancing. And Lord Nityananda stayed next to Lord Chaitanya. Nitai always wanted to stay next to Lord Chaitanya, mostly to sort of catch him if he swooned, if he fell in ecstasy, to sort of be as a protector. Of course, this is Lord Nityananda's position also, to serve. So there were 3 main groups, and they proceeded towards the Kazi's house. But of course they went all around Navadvip first. And many of the chanters became very carried away. And they were saying, yes, we're going to kill the Kazi, we're going to kill the Kazi. This is in Chaitanya Bhagavan now, not Chaitanya Charitamrita. And they started punching the ground, as if the Kazi was there or something. And they became quite angry. And gradually they proceeded towards the house of Chankazi. Chankazi had many guards. They were Muslims, wearing their turbans and had moustache. So the guards got all frightened. And they took off their turbans and tried to hide their moustaches. And they also joined in the chanting. So in the Chaitanya Bhagavad it is described how they demolished Chankazi's house. They weren't playing around. They actually demolished his house. In Chaitanya Charitamrita it's sort of not really referred to like that. It's mentioned more they broke a few pots and a few things like that. But actually in the Chaitanya Bhagavad it's mentioned how they demolished his house. So then this conversation took place, and basically that was straight from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Chankazi, he tried to use some politics. So first of all he alluded to the fact that he and Gaurahari were actually cousins, or rather it was his nephew, and that they had some common family connection. Because Lord Chaitanya's grandfather, Nimbaka Chakravarti, was a friend of Chankazi's father. So he sort of alluded to the fact that, I am your uncle. So don't be too harsh with your uncle now. Just cool down a little bit, please. He was engaging in diplomacy. Because Chankazi was very expert at this. Prior to that, that's right, in Chaitanya Bhagavad, Lord Chaitanya said, I will kill this Chankazi, just like I killed Kalayami, the demon. So it's basically understood that Chankazi was an incarnation of Kamsa. Because Kamsa was that demon, Kalyayani, who Lord Vishnu killed in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's accepted that Hussain Shah, who was the actual emperor, now Chankazi was the magistrate. Kazi is a Muslim word for magistrate. So the emperor of Bengal at that time was Hussain Shah. And it's understood that Hussain Shah was Jarasandha. So Jarasandha was actually the father-in-law of Kamsa and Krishna Lila. Both real heavy-time demons. So Lord Chaitanya engaged in debate, and we heard the debate. The basic point was, why are you killing the cow? Why are you killing the bull, mother and father? And Chankazi was not able to really reply. But then he tried to sort of throw a smokescreen by saying that in your scriptures also animal killing is there. So Lord Chaitanya had to agree. Animal killing, but in a previous age. And it wasn't really animal killing, it was rejuvenation of an old cow or rejuvenation of an old bull. So this actually was done in the previous ages. An old cow, an old bull was rejuvenated and given new life. But in this Kali Yuga, Lord Chaitanya quoted that verse, 5 things are prohibited. The sacrificing of cow, the sacrificing of horse, the taking of sannyas, the offering of flesh as oblations to one's forefathers, and the begatting of children in one's brother's wife, in the wife of one's brother. These 5 things are prohibited in this particular age. So then the Chankazi, he openly admitted, yes, my scripture is full of imperfection. It's true. It's full of imperfection. And then, of course, the realization came that Nishingadev appeared to him. So apparently it had the darshan of Lord Nishingadev. Not only the darshan of Lord Nishingadev, but it's described in Chaitanya Charitamrita that when his bodyguards and his constables when they went to stop the different kirtan players, then their beards were singed. Flames came up and burnt their beards. You know, the Muslims have the beards. It's a sign of masculinity, you know, to have a nice, fluffy, strong, you know, masculine type beard. So their beards were burnt and their cheeks were blistered by some type of flames that were coming. And all of the different constables reported to Chankazi the same thing. So Chankazi had some internal change also. And that's when he made this declaration that from this day on, I or any of my descendants will never stop this Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya. And then Prabhupada writes in the purport that even during the Hindu-Muslim riots, which have taken place on a number of occasions in the last 50 years, I think there's been 3 wars with Pakistan. So these Hindu-Muslim riots now and again come up. So Prabhupada mentioned even during the Hindu-Muslim riots, still the descendants of Chankazi honored this vow. And when we go to Sridham Mayapur, we actually go to that place. And you see the Muslims. They have their bead bags and they wear tilak. I would assume they're vegetarian, but I'm not sure. But they're chanting Krishna's name. It's not far from our temple, Sridham Mayapur temple. So nothing can actually stop this Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya. It's here to stay. Nothing can stop it. We can be instruments, you know. But even if we're not willing to be instruments, it's already been prophesied. Prithivityachiyaji Nagaradigram Savatra Pacha Hoipe Moranam. Every town and village it's already been prophesied. And now we're seeing it coming true. When that prophecy was made in Chaitanya Bhagavat, most of the Vaishnavas, they couldn't really understand it. What does this mean, every town and village? Does it mean every town and village in Madhya Pradesh, in Andhra Pradesh, in Rajasthan, in Orissa, in Bengal, in India? You know, it must mean every town and village in India, they were thinking. They weren't too sure. So, actually this prophecy is worldwide. And Srila Prabhupada was that instrument who helped to fulfill that prophecy. So that mercy of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda flowed through Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was the very one, just him alone, who left India and took this message to America. And the following 11 years, or rather, following 10 years or so, in great inconvenience, traveled all over the world, simply to increase devotees' faith and to give the holy name to different people in different countries. And of course we know Prabhupada came here to South Africa, 1975. Went to Mauritius also. So Prabhupada is that instrument. He's the pure devotee, the very powerful Acharya, who's fulfilling this desire of Lord Chaitanya, every town and village. So we should also be bold. I remember when Prabhupada was going to come in 1975, we thought, right, let's take the Harinam out into Durban, West Street. So we were very bold. So we went out with the Harinam in West Street, and within 2 minutes we were all arrested. In those days you couldn't even use a megaphone. You couldn't even use a megaphone was just to incite a riot. You needed a license to use a megaphone. We used to chant in Hillbrow, 1974, 1975, 1976. Hillbrow is an infamous place. And we used to chant Friday night and Saturday night, because there I think anything goes. You get all crazies and weirdos. So we, in one sense, fitted in there. No one ever stopped us. But when we tried Durban, West Street, we got stopped immediately. But still we continued. You know? And now, of course, we chant on a more regular basis in West Street and Smith Street, and in Pretoria. Pretoria is the capital. South Africa, the devotees very enthusiastically go chanting in Pretoria. And Cape Town, Market Square, Green Square. Green Market Square. So sometimes people may stop. I remember 1974, London. So I was 22 years old, new devotee. Let's celebrate Gaur-Purnim in London, Oxford Street, by going chanting. So we all went chanting. Prabhu Vishnu, he's a Maharaj now, Swami. Mahavishnu, who comes here to South Africa now and again, Mahavishnu Swami. Subhak Swami, Brajendra Kumar Swami. They were all brahmacharis in those days. And Chaitanya Maharaj also, he was there. So, we all got it together, and about 20 or 30 of us went chanting in Oxford Street. And we got halfway down Oxford Street, and the police came. And they planned this, and they arrested all of us. So we all ran. So I tried running also, and I ran straight into a policeman. Grabbed hold of me. But I noticed Prabhu Vishnu, he just casually walked across the road into walls. He was very smart, and he escaped being arrested, I remember that. So then we were put in prison. We were actually put in prison. And we didn't know what to do. So then the idea came, well, you can do puja to Krishna in your mind. So we did puja to Krishna in our minds. And we were put in different cells, actually. But after a while, they realized we were all a little strange because we started murmuring we started chanting and talking to ourselves. So they changed the prisoners around and they put us all in the same cell. And then some or other, Janananda Prabhu, who's come here to South Africa some years ago, he arranged bail. So Gaur-Purnim was on Friday, so Friday night was in prison. And we were wearing the convict's outfit, the outfit with the little arrows on. I took my shoelaces and I tied knots in my shoelaces. And that was my chanting beads, my shoelaces. So they took the neck beads off everything. They were actually quite nasty. They weren't very nice. So then Janananda Prabhu came from the London temple and organized bail. So we were all released on that Saturday afternoon. And I remember driving back to Oxford Street and seeing all the people. So I told Janananda, now just stop the van, let me get out and distribute some books. So I got out and started distributing some books. So when the time came for me to appear in court, actually I went to South Africa instead. So Janananda took my place. Because we all looked the same. We shaved heads. We all looked the same. So actually he said I was me. And he went to court. And he got fined. In those days we used to get fined 50p, £1, £2. It was ridiculous. It was called highway obstruction. So I came to South Africa instead around about June 74. And the court case was like a couple of weeks later. So Janananda stood in my place and he said I was me. He said, I am Parthasarati, I am so-and-so, So impediments are always there. 500 years ago, Chankazi tried to stop, but look what happened. And 25 years ago, there were impediments. There were problems in New York also. Different temples have always experienced problems, but nothing material can impede the Krishna consciousness movement. The Krishna consciousness movement is spiritual, so nothing material can impede it. So Chankazi and the local police and the local governments are simply arrangements of the material energy. So that's not going to impede. This Sankirtan movement will continue and it will become stronger and stronger. Is prophesized. It's already been predicted, and we're seeing the foundation has been laid. This ISKCON movement is the foundation. So as time goes on, it'll become more and more popular, more and more serious. People will take to Krishna consciousness and will have a stronger influence in society in general. And this is what Srila Prabhupada wants, to spread Krishna consciousness. So it happened 500 years ago, it's happening 25 years ago, and it's happening now. People try to stop, but it never really works. They can't impede. So we simply have to have faith in Lord Chaitanya. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gau Premanandi.
Thank you for giving us ISKCON. I pray that I will... Times of Srila Prabhupada. Let's see. Just after I joined, I was initiated maybe 2 months after I joined, which was pretty standard those days. And then maybe the day after I was initiated, Prabhupada went to Boston, and I went there to be Prabhupada's assistant cook. His cook was Govinda Dasi. She was frail and sickly, so she needed an assistant. So I was signed on to be the assistant. Then one day I burned some vegetable, but we didn't give it to Prabhupada, but then Prabhupada knew, so he called me in. Why this vegetable is burned? Prabhupada said, you have no brain. So Prabhupada, I think that was the only time Prabhupada really sauced me out, but he did. Another time Prabhupada was unhappy because we were cooking for him, but he wasn't getting his chapatis properly because the stove was an electric stove, and if you try to cook chapatis on an electric stove, it's tough going because you try to cook them and the heat is not constant. The electric stove either is cold or then it heats up and it becomes hot, but you don't get the benefits of a constant flame. And then how do you blow up the chapati? On what do you blow them up? So Prabhupada was either getting these... Anyway, he was getting horrible imitation, unacceptable chapatis, and he was complaining. So one day he wasn't getting, then 2 days he wasn't getting, and we were giving our excuses. Then Prabhupada said, all right, you prepare everything, and when it's time to cook the chapatis, then you call me. So we called him, Prabhupada came in, and first thing he did was he took a pan off the stove and he turned it upside down. And then naturally the heat rose from the electric electric burner, and came to the pan and made a nice even heat. So he put his chapati on that, and then he was cooking. There's a system, maybe some of you know it, how you can cook a stack of chapatis all at once. Does anyone know that system? I certainly didn't know it, but Prabhupada, he put one chapati, then he cooked it on one side, put another chapati on top, and flipped them, both. And then somehow, I can't understand the physics of it, or the mathematics, or whatever it is, but he increased it so that there was always one side being cooked, and one complete chapati coming off. And it was a stack of about 8 or 10 chapatis. Prabhupada was doing that. And we were trying to roll them. Prabhupada was saying, faster, faster. And then, but then how do you blow them up? So Prabhupada took the grill out of the oven and put it over 2 of the burners. And so the heat was rising from the stove onto onto the rack, and Prabhupada was just throwing his chapatis there, and they were blowing up perfectly. But Prabhupada was expert in everything.
One of Satsvarupa Maharaj's nicest books is called Prabhupada Leela. You have Prabhupada Leelamrita, which is 5 or 6 volumes. But he had many pastimes which he left out. He put into another volume called Prabhupada Leela, which is very nice, actually, very nice book to read. It's always nice to read about Prabhupada, especially, when someone like Satsvarupa Maharaj writes about him, because it's so pure. So in that book, I was mentioning yesterday the campfire, about how when Prabhupada came back from India and he brought presents for his disciples. This is from Prabhupada Leela. So on another occasion, Prabhupada was in New York. I think he was in New York, I'm not sure. but this is more 67. And they organized a program for him at MIT, which is quite a famous institute. Maybe a year later. I might be getting it wrong. It may not be MIT. It was the one where Brahmananda drove them in a sports car. Yeah, Prabhupada went many times. Prabhupada would go for a program, and they just wouldn't even have a car to take him in. So some or other they got a car, and he went to a program, and he gave a very strong talk. And some of the Indian faculty members, who sort of were a little proud of their Indian background, but thought, the Western ways of life also had a lot to offer. So they were sort of challenging Prabhupada. And they were Prabhupada was seemingly in a mood of challenging. One person asked him, why do you wear tilak? And then Prabhupada responded, why do you wear a tie? And the guy sort of bends down and looks at his tie, fiddles with it like Laurel and Hardy or something. I mean, like really cutting. Prabhupada wanted philosophical questions, not, why you wear tilak, why do you have a seeker, he wanted something a bit more substantial. So in the end, Prabhupada, in the lobby of this particular university, and I'm pretty sure it was MIT, he actually got into a heated argument because some of the Indian faculty members were presenting Vivekananda as being, the person who sort of first introduced Vedic culture into the West. So it became a little heated. And Prabhupada was sort of speaking very strongly. And some or other, the conversation sort of ended, and there was no car to take Prabhupada back. There was no car to take him back to the New York temple. So some or other Brahmananda borrowed a sports car. So he got a sports car. I think it was a Triumph Spitfire, but it was a sports car. Have you ever seen any of those English sports cars? They're very low, and there's no room in them at all. So Brahmananda is quite big. So he was sitting, driving the car. Prabhupada, His Divine Grace, in a sports car. It's amazing sometimes what we have to do. When I was reading Rama Damodar Vilas, there were stories of Vishnu John Swami riding on the back of Harley Davidsons also. Anyhow, so Prabhupada was in the sports car. And it was late at night, and Brahmananda was driving fairly fast. And he went over a pothole, according to Satsrit Maharaj and Prabhupada. He went over a pothole, and Prabhupada's head hit the top. Because there's not much distance between your head and the roof. So that evening they got back very late. And the next day Prabhupada left. I think Prabhupada went to Boston at that time. He went from New York to Boston. He got up early in the morning and he left. And the temple president didn't get up to see him off. And Prabhupada felt a little disturbed about that. And later, from Boston, wrote to the temple president and said, you should do as I do. That's when he said that word. You should do as I do. In other words, he was a little disturbed that they couldn't even rise a little bit early to see him off. So he wrote the letter from Boston, sort of just correcting his temple president at that time in New York, saying, you should do as I do. That statement came out at that point.
Because you were speaking about university engagements. Boston is a university town, many schools and colleges. We did one program there with Srila Prabhupada. I forget which school it was. It was around 1970. and Prabhupada finished his talk, and then there was an arrangement for kind of a large room where we'd set up for distributing prasadam, and after the talk, the devotees would be there to talk to the students and faculty and so on. So Prabhupada gave his talk, and the rest of us were now in this room with all the people who'd been there. And Srila Prabhupada was leaving. And all of a sudden, this just like shockwave went through the room. Everybody started buzzing. So I didn't know what had happened. I was in the other side of the room. Here's what had happened. We found out later that there was, I don't know if it was the same engagement or another one, it turned out to be a heated discussion between Srila Prabhupada and some Indian faculty member. And the Indian faculty member was arguing Mayavadi philosophy. And, everything is one, and there's no difference between anything and anything else. And quite strong about it. Finally, Prabhupada grabbed the man by the shirt and shook him and said, "If everything is one, then why don't you wear a cotton ball instead of a shirt?" Prabhupada ki jai.
We think of the pure devotee as being very gentle and serene and sober and controlled, but not always. Kick on their face, urinate on their face. These statements came. I'm reading in Radha Damodar Vilas by Vyasaki Prabhu. It's a very wonderful book about the early days, especially the life of Vishnu John Swami and Jayananda Prabhu's. So, something unknown to me, I didn't know this, but up until Gorponim, 1969, the only dance that the devotees ever did was called the Swami. And they simply went from left to right, from right to left. Not even forward and backwards. Simply from one side to the other, controlled. Never even jumped up and down. So, it's described in this book how on Gorponim, 1969, now, this is some 3 years after ISKCON really had started. 2 3/4 years, we all say. Prabhupada was having a program, now I forget exactly where it was. Los Angeles. And a Gujarati lady came, and this Gujarati lady was sort of like a guru herself. And she came into the program, and she had many followers. They came in also. And Prabhupada started singing. He was on a raised stage, so he was singing. At a certain point, he indicated to Vishnu John Swami to continue the chanting. So Vishnu John Swami continued to chant, playing his drum. And this Gujarati lady, she pulled out some type of dholak. She also had some type of drum. And she started to play. And in those days, the kirtan, was just like one drum per kirtan. So the kirtan immediately picked up, and she was playing all these nice beats. So then Prabhupada came down from the stage and started dancing, but he started dancing in a way that he never danced before. And instead of going from left to right, he was going forward and backwards. And the devotees were amazed. "You can't do that." Wow. Suddenly Prabhupada was doing it. Most unusual. And then the kirtan heated up more and more, and at a certain point Prabhupada beckoned that this Gujarati lady, she also sing. So she was also singing at a certain point, and Prabhupada started to jump up in the air, like actually up in the air. And the devotees were all flabbergasted. This is the first time, apparently. We're thinking, for us it's, a simple thing, but so Prabhupada was jumping up and down, and everyone in the room was jumping up and down with Prabhupada, because it was the first time the kirtan had gone to this sort of higher type of element. So then one of the devotees phoned, it was either New York or Boston, and they said, "Do you know what Prabhupada is doing? Do you know what he's doing? He's jumping up and down." And the answer was, "Well, how do you do it? How do you do it? How do you do it?" And they said, "Well, he's jumping up and down, jumping up and down." And then according to Vyasaki, the next day, Kirtan and ISKCON changed. The next day it changed. So, but I myself didn't know that. So it's interesting, the early days, how ISKCON sort of evolved, and how it came, and how we picked up different things, and how Mangalati was introduced at a certain point. 1970, Prabhupada introduced, just before he went to India in 1970, he introduced Mangalati 4:30. Prior to that it was 6:30. And even when I joined of course a lot later, 1973, with Chaitanya Maharaj, there was no Guru Puja. Guru Puja came a few months later, a little later. So it's interesting how things have evolved.
In New York, sometimes I went on some morning walks with Srila Prabhupada with other devotees. One time, Prabhupada went on a walk by the East River when our temple was in Brooklyn, where it still is actually. And you know this Watchtower Society, the Jehovah's Witnesses? So they have their international headquarters there. And as Prabhupada was taking his walk, in the distance those buildings were there. So then the devotees were talking about the Watchtower Society. Someone said, "Srila Prabhupada, they publish in 42 different languages." And someone else, not to be outdone, "Srila Prabhupada, they have 16 presses." And somebody else, "Srila Prabhupada, in the event of a war, they have so much paper stocked that they could go for 1 year without interruption." So everybody's, showing they know something. Finally Prabhupada said, "So? What is their philosophy?" Nobody had any idea. Another time on a walk, we'd gone, it was one of those drives to a walk, and we were driving back, and just as we were coming around the corner, not 22nd Avenue, it was Henry Street, also in Brooklyn. We had a nice temple there. And we were just reaching the temple, and on the corner is a mailbox. And one gentleman was picking up his son. You know how I don't know how the postal boxes are here, but in America it's like a box about this high, and it has a kind of a door that opens up, and you drop your letter in there and it falls into the box. So one gentleman was picking up his son, and the son was dropping the letter in. And Prabhupada was looking, and this just took about 7 seconds or something. Srila Prabhupada was seeing this and just becoming absorbed. He was just becoming absorbed in seeing this, and his eyes grew very wide, and he had this faraway look, and he was just, as if time was frozen. Prabhupada was just absorbed in seeing this scene. And then after a moment the scene ended, and I was wondering, what is Prabhupada thinking? Maybe something from his childhood in Calcutta or something like that. Then Prabhupada said, "The little boy, by his own power, he cannot do. But the affectionate father, when he helps, then it is possible."
When Prabhupada came to South Africa, Harikesh Baru was his servant. Brahmananda was actually Prabhupada's servant. But Brahmananda, unfortunately, was blacklisted. He tried to get into South Africa over the border from Zimbabwe, years ago, 1972. And he just pitched up at the immigration border, 170 kilos, full devotional attire, shaved head, big tilak, demanding his way into South Africa. So they couldn't, the Afrikaners just couldn't handle it. The Afrikaner mindset just couldn't handle it. So he got blacklisted. So he was never allowed in South Africa. So Harikesh Babu took his position, and so Harikesh Babu, Pusta Krishna Swami, they were here in South Africa. And when Prabhupada was here, we didn't know this, but Prabhupada had toothache. But Prabhupada didn't immediately tell us that. He simply asked the devotees, go and buy me different ingredients to make toothpaste. So we used to go to Haribai's and these different spice shops, J.T. Bula, but we couldn't get all the right ingredients. It just wasn't possible. So also the devotees used to go out and try to get nimwood toothbrushes, because in India they use the branch of a tree. It's a twig. You may see this in India. It's a small twig as thick as my finger, ideally from a nim tree, and then you peel off the bark, and then you rub it on the teeth. And Prabhupada would use those. So we were going around looking for nim trees. The best we could come up with was a eucalyptus tree, which was also reasonable. So I was the pujari. I was in charge of the deities. They always left me behind. That was... Anyhow, so another devotee, Gokalendra, and someone else got in a car. This is at Westville. So Westville has the Indian area and it has the European area. Of course, this is now, 30 years ago. So they went to the European area, climbed the tree, wearing dhoti, shaved head, tilak, and they're breaking down branches, trying to get, it's called a datoon, or it's a wooden toothbrush. And who should come along but the South African police? So the South African police come along, and they say, what are you doing up a tree wearing a bedsheet? Can you imagine, Afrikaner policemen, they're not endowed with a full quota of, with respect. So what does Gokalendra say? What do you think I'm doing? I'm getting toothbrushes for my guru. I mean, it's obvious. I'm getting a toothbrush for my guru up a eucalyptus tree, 5:30 in the morning. So anyhow, he got a whole bunch of twigs, and he brought them back to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada used them. But still the pain was there. So then they called a dentist. So as it was, we weren't very organized in those days. So they went and organized a Muslim dentist. I don't know why a Muslim dentist. There were so many others. So as Dr. Muhammad came, and he came to Prabhupada, and he looked in his mouth. I know this because subsequently I went to Dr. Muhammad, and I had him do some fillings on my mouth. And while he was working on my mouth, I asked him, did Prabhupada talk to you? What did you see in the mouth? What was wrong with Prabhupada's mouth, the teeth? And he told me that it seemed like some of Prabhupada's teeth were a little loose. And he attributed it to some type of phenomenon which is quite common with people coming from India or that side of the world. And his diagnosis was that Prabhupada should have some teeth taken out. But Prabhupada didn't go for it. He didn't have his teeth taken out. Apparently the pain went down. And then I remember Hari Kesh telling us, it was after 3 or 4 days, and Hari Kesh Prabhu was quite amazed that he himself didn't realize that Prabhupada was in pain. That all this noise about getting tattoos and toothpaste was because Prabhupada was in pain. So he was sort of glorifying Prabhupada by saying that Prabhupada didn't even sort of tell us. He just kept it to himself, as it were, So when Prabhupada left South Africa, all the devotees piled in the cars and went to the airport, and I was left, in the house, myself and one other devotee, I forget who it was. As usual, I was left behind. I should have been more insistent. But anyhow, I went into Prabhupada's bathroom, and there, what did I find? A datun. So I have that datun. I have it in a box, a special wooden box. And I took a little bit of it and I put it in a tablet, which sometimes I wear on my neck.
What you talked about reminded me of when Prabhupada visited Chicago and Detroit in America. In Chicago also Prabhupada had quite serious toothache, but he just ignored it. I remember he gave very just powerful, strong lectures there. Chicago and Detroit are not so far apart. In Detroit, different things. One lady came, a newspaper reporter, journalist, young lady, I think she might have just been out of journalism school. And her questions were, the typical superficial questions. But Prabhupada agreed to see her. And Prabhupada just took it as an opportunity for preaching. And to this very simple person, he just began preaching Krishna conscious philosophy. And she was busy holding an interview, but Prabhupada, he just saw it as an opportunity. He didn't care about the interview. He saw it as an opportunity for preaching to her. So he was speaking about the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. But one exchange was classic. She had the typical question, why do you shave your head? And Prabhupada answered her, why do you shave your legs? And then Prabhupada said, better to have a cool brain and warm legs. And yes, no. That was something else. She was a nice lady, and Prabhupada was very cordial with her. Our Detroit temple is a big mansion which was purchased by 2 devotees. Ambarish Prabhu, who was the great-grandson of Henry Ford, and Leka Shravanti Dasi, who was the daughter of Walter Reuther. Henry Ford, as you know, was the big automobile magnate, and Walter Reuther, you may not know, was the leader of the labor movement that was basically trying to unionize the car factories. So they were, of course, big enemies, but their grandson and daughter cooperated, both joined the Hare Krishna movement and bought this mansion for Srila Prabhupada. Because of her family connections, she knew various leaders in the Detroit area, and she invited, when Prabhupada came, she invited one local councilman to meet Srila Prabhupada. He was a very nice gentleman, a black man, and very respectful and very nice. And we have beautiful deities in Detroit also. Detroit temple, it came actually with the temple room had 3 arches naturally, so all we had to do was put the deities there. They have Gaurnatai, and then Radha Kunja Bihari, Radharani's beautiful white marble deity, Krishna's beautiful black marble deity. and the third deity, maybe Jagannath. So Prabhupada, the gentleman came up to see Srila Prabhupada, and the Prabhupada said to him, "So you have seen the deity?" And the man said, "Yes." And Prabhupada said, "Krishna is also coming from your community." Also in Detroit, I'd been traveling and preaching in colleges nearby with Satsut Maharaj and others. And one time I was talking with Srila Prabhupada, and I said to Srila Prabhupada, it's so difficult to convince the students to give up sense gratification. And Prabhupada said, we don't say give up. We say regulate. You don't give up sense, but you have to regulate. Everything regulated.
One example is it's like salt. So too much salt spoils it, and too little spoils it. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Alright, Dave? So, I wrote about this in my book, my feeble attempt at writing, that Prabhupada was having an afternoon darshan at 59 Muller Street in Yeovil. I drove past that house the other day, actually, with Vrishabhanu. And the house is a little dilapidated, but I thought it'd be nice if we could purchase that house. This is where Prabhupada stayed. Of course, he also stayed at 98 Devonshire Terrace, 98, 99 in Westville, when that house is also available. Anyhow, in Yeovil, Prabhupada was staying, and it was his habit that in the afternoon he would sit in the garden and we would read from Chaitanya Charitamrita, because it had just come out. It had just been published, Chaitanya Charitamrita. So, after reading, and then Prabhupada would take some fresh pineapple juice, some type of fresh juice. Then you'd go back into his room. We were having an evening darshan, perhaps 30 devotees sitting in Prabhupada's room. Prabhupada's room in Yeovil was actually the brahmachari room. We converted it into his room. And Prabhupada was reading. He was speaking quite strongly about utilizing one's life in Krishna consciousness. And I happened to be sitting right in front of him. And then at one point Prabhupada quoted the verse, Kamasnandriyapita loba jivata yavitaha jivasya tattva jignasya anatayas chakama behi. And then he stopped. And then he looked at me, because I happened to be sitting in front of him. And he said, find that verse. So I went completely froze. Now, 1975, I knew perhaps 20 verses from the Bhagavad Gita. I hadn't progressed to the Bhagavatam. So this is a verse from the Bhagavatam. So just like I said that verse, Prabhupada said that verse, same speed. So I had to somehow to remember. So someone handed me, someone handed me the first volume of the Bhagavatam. And it was dead silence. Everyone was looking at me, including Prabhupada. Dead silence. So I looked in the index, because in the index you have the first line and the third line of every verse. So I had to try to remember what Prabhupada said. No one was helping me. I got the feeling that they didn't know either. I got that feeling. Although it's a fairly well-known verse, in those days we weren't very scholarly. So I mentioned that verse, and I mentioned the 4 lines. Can you remember? Can anyone here remember any one of those 4 lines? Well, you have to remember the first line or the third one, because that's in the index, not the second and fourth. So just like Prabhupada said it, quickly. So I said it also at the same speed, so who can remember? First line? Anyone? Or third line? Maharaj, can you remember? Even one word? Kamashnendriya, that's the first line. But you're going to need more. You need the first vowel, the first syllables, the first couple. So all I remembered was Jivasya Tattva Jignasya. Because it sort of rhymes. Jivasya Tattva. So I was sweating like anything. My heartbeat was going up to 200. So I looked for Jivasya Tattva Jignasya. Now usually, when I look for verses, guaranteed it always goes wrong. When it comes to languages and all that, I don't. It's not my forte. So I was convinced I was going to get it wrong. But I was hoping against hope that someone, one of the sannyasis, would sort of help me. But they were remaining all quiet. I couldn't quite figure it out. So I thought either I'm doing it right, I'm getting the right verse, or they don't know at all. So all these thoughts were going through my mind, and Prabhupada is sitting in front of me, and there's 25 people in the room all waiting for my, to speak. So I looked for Jivasya Tattva Jignasya, and it was first canto, chapter 2, text 7, 8, 9. Canto 1, chapter 2, text 9, more or less. So I turned to that. No one was stopping me. So I thought, well, maybe it's right. No one was stopping me. I thought surely one of the sannyasis would stop me if it was wrong. So then I read the verse. Kamashnendriya prita loba jivata yavitaha jivasya tattva jignasya nata yascha kahama behi. And Prabhupada said, Purport. So that was easy. That's English. The worst part was over now. So then I read the English. That was a simple part. And no translation, and then he said purport. So I read the whole thing. And then, without saying, then he just continued his talk. But at least, I got it right. Didn't. And then what happened was, I mentioned this before at that program, and it was at Ramanuja. I can only speak as it happened. It's completely what happened. So Ramanuja, our God brother, was sitting next to me. And Prabhupada quoted another verse from the 5th canto. He was speaking a lot from Vrishabhadev's teachings at that time, from the 5th canto. Because the 5th canto, we just given it to him. That famous picture of Prabhupada getting the 5th canto was in Johannesburg. So he was reading from the 5th canto, 5th chapter, teachings of Vrishabhadev. And there's a famous verse, 5.5.18, Guru na syasat, Janani na syasat. One should not become a guru, a mother, father, a guru, a demigod, unless one can free one's dependence from the cycle of birth and death. It's a very powerful verse. And Prabhupada quoted that verse. And the same thing, he said, find that verse. And this time he looked at Ramanuja Prabhu. And Ramanuja Prabhu wasn't really able to find the verse for some reason or other. Although he's, very scholarly, and in those days we used to consider him like a Sanskrit, Hindi expert, because he'd spent time in India. But he wasn't able to find the verse for some reason or other. They handed him the wrong volume or something. So I thought, well, this is Krishna's mercy that somehow or other I'm less qualified, much less qualified, especially when it comes to, Sanskrit compared to Ramanuja Prabhu. He sort of understands Hindi and all these things. So, and yet I was able to find it, so I always took that as Krishna's arrangement. So after that, I learned that verse off by heart. So now I know it off by heart. It's one of the One of the two verses I know off by heart.
Did I tell the story about the gentleman from the Yoga Society who came to Sri Srila Prabhupada? We were at 61 2nd Avenue. Our first temple was 26 2nd Avenue. And then it became small, and we got a larger place down the street, 61 2nd Avenue. But Prabhupada still had his apartment at 26, behind the storefront. And one afternoon, Prabhupada had come to New York, and an elderly gentleman from one of the uptown yoga societies came. And he had a letter from Srila Prabhupada that when I come to New York, then you can see me personally. And they'd have some correspondence. So there was this man with his letter. So, okay, Brahmananda had me bring the gentleman over to Srila Prabhupada's apartment. And the man was very respectful, and he said to Srila Prabhupada, he said, "Swamiji, I like your movement very much, but one thing disturbs me." He said that one of your disciples said that such and such respectable Indian sadhu was a rascal. And I don't understand. It seems to me that he's a very holy man, and I don't understand why you would say, the disciple had said that you'd said that he was a rascal. I don't understand. And Prabhupada said, "Who has said this?" And the man said, "You didn't say." And Prabhupada said, "If he has said that I have said, and I have not said, then he is rascal." Well, the man was a little pacified. Okay. Then Prabhupada took down a book from his bookcase, blue hard-bound volume, Bhagavad Gita, written by one prominent Indian politician and scholar. And Prabhupada said, you know this book? And the man said, "Oh, Dr. Such and Such, Vedanta Society." He was very happy. So Prabhupada opened the book to the 9th chapter and picked out one verse, "Manmana bhava madbhakta madhyaji mam namaskuru." And Prabhupada had the gentleman read the translation. And he read the translation, and always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, offer your homage to me. Prabhupada said, yes, he is a very good scholar. Now, purport, what does he say? And the man began reading. "It is not to Krishna that we have to surrender, but to the unborn, beginningless, such and such." Prabhupada said, "Just see." He said, "Therefore I say they are all rascals." Like Krishna says me, and he's saying not to Krishna. Krishna says me, he says not to Krishna. And Krishna says, "Namam duskrita namudha prapadyante naratama maya pratagyana asura bhavamashrita." And Prabhupada explained each word. Duskritana means rascal, mudha means ass, naratama, the lowest among human beings, maya pratagyana, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, asura bhavamashrita, lowest demons. Prabhupada said, "It is not my saying, it is Krishna's saying. What can I do?" Then Prabhupada also told him, he said that sometimes strong words are needed to awaken a sleeping man. Prabhupada would typically speak very strongly. Prabhupada one time wrote to Giriraj Maharaj, he said that my Guru Maharaj never compromised, that I never compromise, nor should any of my disciples ever compromise. That was Prabhupada's mood.
when I joined, Maharaj said that he got initiated after 2 months, which is how it was in those days. That's how it was. Actually, the standard was 3 months when I joined. You had to wait. So I had been in the movement 2 months, so I lied.
That's how it was.
And that's how it was in those days. So there was no problem. I was going to get initiated. And Chaitanya Maharaj was supposed to get initiated in the same ceremony. Actually, it was a Bhaktivedanta manner. But he was coming from Berry Place, the temple in central London, and he got lost. He got lost. So he got initiated in the next batch after me. Otherwise, we would have got initiated together. So it was a Bhaktivedanta manner. We just moved in. It was a big place, very cold because we couldn't afford the money to heat it. Prabhupada came and spent a few months there in 1974. 22 acres. It was 22 acres. Anyhow, prime land, beautiful place. So Prabhupada was very pleased with it. And there was an initiation ceremony. It was some 7 to 8 weeks after I joined. I remember asking the temple president, his name was Dhananjaya Prabhu. Dhananjaya Prabhu happens to be Chaitanya Maharaj's cousin. This is completely coincidental. Dhananjaya Prabhu is now in MVT land. He's running that MVT land and restaurant and in Vrindavan together with his wife. So at that time he was the temple president. He's actually from Scotland. So we were sitting in front of Prabhupada. Oh, that's right, they wanted someone to hold the beads. Some or other I got chosen. So I'm standing right next to Srila Prabhupada who's sitting, and I'm holding all the beads, maybe 10 pairs of beads. About 10 of us were getting initiated. And Prabhupada was chanting on the beads, and he had one sannyasi, 2 sannyasis also chanting on the beads, Ripathanandana Swami and Pusta Krishna Swami. So I made sure that I gave Prabhupada my beads, because I wanted him to chant on my beads. So, because I was giving the beads, I made sure that he chanted on my beads. So he was chanting on my beads, and other devotees' beads. And then everyone else was chanting with him. And of course we were sort of chanting quietly, not trying to chant too loud, but Prabhupada was chanting, and then Prabhupada stopped the chanting and said, who is not pronouncing properly? Someone is not pronouncing properly. Someone is pronouncing improperly. And of course, there's dead silence. Because who's going to admit? No one's going to admit. So there's dead silence. And then we carried on. And then after about another 3 or 4 minutes, Prabhupada stopped everyone again and said again, someone is not chanting the Maha Mantra properly. So this time, we were really on edge. And then at that point, we're looking at each other. It's like, it's not me, is it you? It's that type of look. That look where, it can't be you because it's not me. Like that. Anyhow, we continued. And then, believe it or not, Prabhupada stopped a 3rd time. He stopped us 3 times. And then Pusta Krishna Swami, he was actually the original devotee here in South Africa. He's very intelligent. He's still favorable to our society. Now he's a doctor. He's very smart. He was Jewish and extremely intelligent. Of course, Jewish doesn't necessarily make you intelligent, but he was very intelligent.
I'll tell you a story.
This is not a Prabhupada story, but it's pretty good. That Achyutananda Maharaj was, of course the Jews always flatter themselves that they're very intelligent. So Achyutananda Maharaj was with some Jewish gentleman, and the gentleman say, why is it that so many Jewish people join your society? And he said, because they're the most intelligent.
Yeah, it's actually quite true. Many of our leaders come from Jewish backgrounds.
Prabhupada,
in the beginning that was particularly true. There there were so many. There was this one and that. There was Lefkowitz and so many Jewish devotees. And Prabhupada at one point said that we are also a Jewish concern.
You're Jewish also?
Not this body.
Oh, it should change. You're not this Jewish body. Anyhow, so Pusta Krishna, he was smart. He was very smart. Prabhupada liked him. And immediately he offered an answer. And it was a good answer. And the answer was, Prabhupada, you're perfect. You're liberated. We're subject to 4 defects. Therefore we make mistakes. And one of our mistakes is we're not able to chant properly. And because our senses are imperfect, we're not able to hear properly. But you can hear perfectly. So he gave that as an answer, which Prabhupada seemed to accept. And then we continued chanting, and after that, whoever it was who wasn't chanting properly. But I found out actually who it was about 20 years later. It was Rajashekhar's wife. Yeah. So while we were chanting, so Rajashekhar Prabhu is a very nice, he's a brahmachari living in India. He printed the pictorial books of Vrindavan, Govardhan Hill, Radhakund. You may have seen those picture books. Very nicely done, a series of 3 or 4. So he was sitting in the front row. Now I didn't know this, but he was sitting right in the front row, and it was his wife who was chanting, with too much, wasn't quite pronouncing it properly. So he told me, and this was about 5 years ago, so 20 years later he told me that I was also chanting. I was standing and I was chanting. So in those days, I was a bit of a fanatic, and I still am. So when I was chanting Hare Krishna, I had my eyes closed. And I was going, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Just like in the old days. We all used to do it. I mean, not all, but most of us. I was one of the main culprits. I would go, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, So naturally I was doing that. And Prabhupada was sitting here and he looked around and he looked at me. But because my eyes were closed, I didn't see it. Because I was going like this. Rajashekhar told me that 20 years later. What kind is this? No, not one of the 8,400,000. So, anyhow, then it came time to get initiated. So then Prabhupada called me Bhakta Robert. Well, my name was called and I went up. And then Prabhupada gave me the beads. He gave me the name Parthasarati Das. He didn't explain what it meant or anything. And as soon as he gave me the name, I forgot it. Because it's quite a long name. Parthasarati. And I went into anxiety. Oh my Lord, I forgot my name. So then I went to the devotees. I said, what's my name? What's my name? They said, it's all right. It's on page so-and-so, chapter 1 of Bhagavad Gita, page 44. It's written there. This is your name. And I sort of memorized it. And it took me at least 1 month to memorize my name.
This story, I think, was told to me by Upendra Prabhu. Upendra was Prabhupada's personal servant. Very nice devotee. He's now expired. he was sitting with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was talking about he was explaining the verse, Swayambhu Narada Sambhu Kumara Kopulamanu, the 12 Mahajans. So he was listing, there's Brahma, Narada, Lord Shiva, Kumaras, Prahlad, Janaka, Bhishma, Bali, Sukadeva Goswami,